So now we're kind of getting into the home straight, the last sort of bit, and we're now going to talk about negative body image, and we're going to talk, integral theory is going to really come into this, because what we need to understand are the 4 quadrants and where things come from, and also lines of development. So we got the 4 quadrants here, as we talked about before. The 4 quadrants can be distilled into the big 3, as we see here. So the 2 exterior quadrants have come together to make this part of the big 3 here. And the lower left has become this one, and the upper left has become that one. What we've got here as well are lines of development and the integral psychograph. So what we go through stages of consciousness development, but each line of development, like cognitive, moral, interpersonal, spiritual, kinesthetic, affective, compassion, and all the list goes on, they develop independently of each other. So with dance, kinesthetics obviously going to be really high because they're focusing on it. Aesthetics are going to be really high, but if those are really high and there's a whole bunch of other lines that are really helpful to balance that are really low, then we're just going to have like a whole bunch of other issues that are coming along, like negative body image. So Ken Wilber's 4 quadrants expressed as the big 3: the good, morals, intersubjective truth; the true, science, objective truth; and the beautiful, art or subjective truth. We can't deny aesthetics, but beauty is a subjective dimension. Art, so we can't mistake an objective interpretation. For example, my butt looks like this, my abs are like that, my boobs are this size, my eyebrows are this shape, etc., as the whole definition of an ultimately subjective interpretation. What we can state as objective truth is physical health. Optimal hormone levels, gut health, optimal neurotransmitters, toxin levels. There are clear measurements that denote optimal levels or not. Hormones at a certain low level cause negative feeling, at an optimal level, positive feeling, etc. So we can be really objective about that. So when it comes to like aesthetics, like there's an objective part aspect to that, but each individual has to give their own subjective interpretation of what objectively looks attractive to them. We'll get onto that in other slides, but just another principle that underlies this is just getting outside of oneself. So, and this one's a particularly poignant for women as well, just because of how much societal emphasis on beauty is put onto them having hair. And speaking as from the perspective of someone who shaves their head and has done for a long time, there's definitely a liberating space where you zip it off your head, and then you realize, I really don't care. Well, that was me anyway, but being a man, my experience in society is different. So I'm not saying this should be the same for women, but this can be done as a thought experiment as well, to just force one's ego to get outside themselves. If I shaved my head bald and or wore no makeup for a minimum of 6 months, how could I find the ability within myself, absent those things, to continue feeling at least as, and ideally more, beautiful as I do now without them? So, no hair, no makeup. How do you feel at least, if not more, beautiful than you do right now when you have them? So when you have hair and you got makeup and you feel a certain level of beauty, you zipped all your hair off, wore no makeup. And when I say zip your hair off, I mean like that. How could you feel as beautiful, at least, if not more, than you do right now when you have your hair and are wearing makeup? If you take those away, how do you find that space within yourself to feel at least as beautiful as you do now when you have those things, once you've taken them away? And this comes into what Ken Wilber talked about with his definition of a strong ego and a weak ego. So that's a thought experiment, and one that's really worth taking a lot of time. And for some, you may want to do it. For some people, you may want to actually do that. For other people, you may just want to stick with the thought experiment for now, but it's worth doing at least as a thought experiment. Now, all right, how do I get, okay. All right. So there's something in the way of this first line, so I can't see that now. So I'm just going to, before we get onto this bit, I'm just going to quote a little exchange from Snow White. So forgive me for messing up the first line, but I'm just going to do the first little bit. So the Queen goes, "Slave in the magic mirror, come from thy thing and let me see thy face." Magic mirror goes, "What wouldst thou know, my queen? Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? Famed is thy beauty, majesty, but hold, a lovely maid I see. Rags cannot hide her gentle grace. Alas, she is more fair than thee. Alas for her, reveal her name. Lips red as the rose, hair black as ebony, skin white as snow. Snow White." So basically, there we got some shadow material going on, where the Queen is basically using her aesthetics as kind of like a scoreboard, and she thinks it's a game full of winners and losers, and she feels like she's losing because Snow White's about. I'm going to start this bit off with a quote from one of the world's greatest poets, who I learned about after hearing Paul Chek talk about him and sharing this specific quote. So Rabindranath Tagore said, "Beauty is truth's smile when she beholds her own face in a perfect mirror." Now, if we wanted to just be general, we could say that's the only thing anyone ever needs to hear when it comes to fixing negative body image, period. All the whole answer to fixing negative body image is in that sentence and in between the words. However, let's flesh it out a little bit more. So when Truth smiles and sees her own self in a perfect mirror, and a mirror only shows what's there, so the perfection comes in the subjective interpretation and acceptance of what is seen in the mirror, the truth of what is in the mirror. So what do aesthetics mean to us? What do I like? How do I, truly I, meaning not society's opinion, want to look and feel? Now, because like with the 4 quadrants here, we've got the interior quadrants and we've got the exterior quadrants. So beauty is a subjective truth. Science is an objective truth. So aesthetic beauty becomes dysfunctional when the ego measures its value only in an objective way. Angles, measurements, curve size, numbers, etc. This turns aesthetics into a kind of external sport where the numbers and objective measurements, such as the specific measurable number of likes and comments on a social media post, emphasizing a certain aesthetic-based feature of someone, such as their physique in a bathing suit or a portrait of their face, are interpreted by the ego the way ones and zeros are on a competition scoreboard. And this breeds a winners and losers mindset in a realm of life that isn't supposed to be thought of that way. So this sort of scoreboard thing, that's why we have this image here of the lady with a bloody nostril using her good nostril to continue snorting likes and comments and all that kind of stuff. Aesthetics are supposed to be thought of as, this is what beauty means to me, and I respect and love that yours may be different. So this is where, going back to the Tagore's quote, the smile of truth, seeing its own face and the perfection of its own truth in the mirror. That's what that means. The subjective truthful interpretation of what beauty means to them. And each person is allowed their own definition of beauty, their own definition of themselves, and their own definition of someone else in terms of general beauty, in terms of what they're attracted to romantically, and also just what they find beautiful in general. However, it doesn't go beyond a platonic loving of someone or something's beauty. Again, we've got to make sure that there isn't associated shadow material attached to that, making it dysfunctional, but that's the general guiding principle. There are certain objective components to beauty, but without them integrated with interior development, they mean very little. Like in a romantic context, unless you're only engaging in very short-term dating sexual situations, what matters more and keeps you around each other without toxic conflict are each other's interiors relating to one another. So that being said, there needs to be a genuine physical attraction to spark the flame and get the fire going. So that can't be denied, but attraction is not a choice. You either are or you aren't. But after that, what keeps that fire building is one's interior relating to one another. No interior means that initial spark and flame dies out very quickly. And one of the other things contributing to like that initial spark is also the primal parts of our bodies recognizing whether we're too genetically similar to someone or not. So pheromones, and this was another thing about the pill. The pill disrupts the connection between a woman's brain and her ovaries. So it's harder for her to recognize who would be a good partner for her or not. Because if there's too much genetic similarity, that's not good for the human species. So people that have a great enough difference of genetic material can sort of like plug the holes of each person's genetic material. So the child that they could potentially create will have more optimal immune system, etc. Right, final point on this slide. Like any conforming to someone else's subjective opinion on beauty, if it doesn't genuinely line up with our own, is a symptom of something deeper. For example, a shadow where maybe a child didn't get enough attention from their parents and as such validation. So their self-esteem was not built well, avoidant or anxious attachment style. And as such, the ego thinks, mostly through time on social media these days, that them aesthetically conforming to the current societal opinion on beauty will get them the validation, like Instagram likes and comments and all that they didn't get as a child. But that's a personal interior root cause. That's this quadrant here. Personal interior root cause of which their ego is trying to use personal exterior means to satiate, which doesn't work. If a human has a dehydration problem, you can't have them eat food and expect that issue to be fixed. Only water will sort dehydration, and only interior healing modalities will sort an interior issue. So what we've got is compensations happening in the wrong quadrant. So people's psyches are trying to use external means to satiate a deficit in an internal structure, but that doesn't work. It's not to deny the fact that those external things are there, but things are just getting messed up. It's just certain things work for certain things and other things don't work for that same thing.